Ahoy, hoy. How's it going? Hi. My name's Trevor. Thank you so much for having me. This will be a lot of fun. This is the first panel I've ever had to moderate, and this is probably the biggest room they could possibly fill with people for it, so this isn't terrifying at all. Yeah, my name's Trevor. I run a little company here in Montreal called Plateau Astro. I teach about space and astronomy, and this is really cool. But you're probably not here to see me. I hope not, at least. This is a public panel, interstellar travel. Are we ready? So before we start, we're going to be going and talking about different worlds and different places and stuff, but it's good to remember where we are right now. So we're going to start with this video. So this is the 8th Interstellar Symposium. Who's at the symposium? Who's at the conference this week? Show of hands. Okay. You can yelp, you can yell. Who's here just for the public night, just for the heck of it? Okay. Most people. Okay. Wow, you got in for free. You didn't have to buy a conference ticket. Great. Okay. The theme for this conference is in the light of other suns. And I think it's good because there's a lot of people who are just here for tonight and not here for the conference, to get like some perspective, some sort of context of what are some of the distances and lengths of time we're sort of talking about here. So here's 2 questions. How far away is the nearest star? And how close have we gotten to it? Okay. Why are you laughing? Okay, all right. Anybody know what this is? Okay, Voyager, yes, it's Voyager 1, yeah. This was launched the year that Star Wars came out, 1977, and it has been going through space, and it's the most distant object from Earth. Clearly, okay. How far has it gotten? It's gone 24 billion kilometers away from Earth. Now, kilometers are kind of useless at this point. Look how many zeros there are. So if we kept talking about distances to stars, that's going to be a lot more zeros. So let's not use kilometers for this. What we're going to use instead is this here, astronomical unit. Who's heard of an astronomical unit? Okay, about half the crowd. Okay, all right. An astronomical unit is basically, we got the sun here, we got the Earth here, and it's the distance between the Earth and the sun. Okay, so we call that 1 AU. Does that make sense? That took a long time to animate, so good. All right. So instead of 24 billion kilometers away, we'll use AU for this, for how far Voyager is. So Voyager is 160 AU. It's a bit of a more reasonable number to sort of understand there. Okay? So that's the distance from Earth to Voyager, the most distant thing we sent in space, 160 AU. The nearest star, how far away is the nearest star? 268,521 AU. And even that number is a little bit nutty, okay? So how far is that? Here's what you have to do. I want everybody to take out a business card. I've got time, take them out, okay? It can be a credit card, it can be a debit card. I've got this video on loop. All right. I've got like 50 business cards in my back pocket, so I can throw them like confetti into the audience if I need to. Everybody's got their business card? All right. Hold it up. Okay? In front like this. Opus card. That's a good one. All right. Good. Hold it in that sort of orientation there, okay? Lengthwise like that, okay? On the left-hand side is Earth. And on the right-hand side is Voyager, okay? That's how far Voyager has gotten. You with me? This analogy took forever to orchestrate. Okay. So how far away is the nearest star? Not including our sun, because this guy, okay, all right. How far away is the nearest star using this business card, okay? So left-hand side, Earth. Right-hand side, Voyager, okay? How far away is the nearest star? About 1 Canadian football field away, okay? About 150 meters, okay? Canadian football field, okay? That includes the end zones, okay? So we are right here, and we've moved 1 business card length away. That's the furthest thing. And we got to get over here if we want to get to the nearest star, okay? It's not just about distance, it's also about how long things take. My voice just cracked, okay? How long does it take, okay? We sent Voyager out the year Star Wars came out, okay? So that's been 46 years. It's been going on through space, okay? How long at the same speed that Voyager's going out right now would it take to reach the nearest star that is not our sun? 16,700 years. So that's not within your lifetime or my lifetime, okay? That's a ways away. That's the point of this symposium. That's the point of this conference, is to hopefully make that number a bit smaller. Now, I realize the font just went smaller, not the actual number there, but I think you're gonna get the analogy. So, does that make sense? Good. Good, 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 good. All right. My God, this is a big room. Okay, all right. So here's the agenda for tonight. Asterisk, hopefully the agenda. So first few minutes, we're gonna bring people up here, and they're each gonna give a short presentation. So the first 25 minutes. Panel discussion, I have questions ready to roll for them right here. And then the last 15 minutes, we're gonna do some audience questions. Who's ever been to a public event where they have a microphone for the public and it's not been awkward? Okay, all right. So instead of a microphone we're gonna give to you, we're gonna do the reasonable thing. We've set up a QR code and a little URL for you, and you can choose who you want the question for, and then ask your question, and we got a crackpot team of people who are gonna give me the good ones. So write a good one. Good? All right. And that should work. I tested that QR code from everywhere in the audience, so it should be good. All right, last thing before we bring people on. Who are you? Who are you? Okay, who here is in engineering? That is a lot of people, okay, all right. Who here is in medicine? A few people, okay. Who's in the arts? Okay, a few people, okay. Philosophy? Okay, a few of you. Sociology? Okay, all right. Who's a lawyer here? Oh, not shy, okay, good, all right. That's low-hanging fruit, Trevor, you know it. Okay, astronomy? Okay. And I think I saw at least one astronaut walking around today. I'm not sure if they're in the audience, but who wants to be an astronaut? Okay, all right, cool. So it's a bunch of people in this audience, that's good. We're gonna cover quite a few of these different types of topics, so I think we should be good. All right, interstellar travel, are we ready? Public panel, are we ready to start the show? Yes, okay. Man, it's a ruckus in here. Okay, all right. First person we bring out is Les Johnson. He's a physicist, author, and NASA technologist. Second is Alan Stern, NASA's New Horizon Pluto flyby mission PI. Up next is AJ Link, and he's a Howard University? Harvard. Howard School of Law. I have to trust former me that I wrote everything right in the slides. Okay. Next, Erica Nesvold from Just Space Alliance. They were literally in a plane like 4 hours ago. They made it. All right. Okay, and last but not least, we have Philip Lubin from UC Santa Barbara. Good. Okay, so what's going to happen next? I'm going to introduce Les Johnson, and he's going to talk, give a brief talk, and then he's going to introduce people, and then we're going to start the panel. Does that sound good? All right.
All right, very good.
There you go.
Thank you. I guess to begin with, I better introduce who I am and why I'm here, right? And tell you a little bit of background about the symposium that's going on this week. And just by quick way of introduction, the Interstellar Research Group is dedicated to setting the stage for interstellar travel, and they're the primary sponsors of this event. Tonight, I'll tell you a little bit about the history of the IRG, its origins, and how we came to be here in beautiful Montreal, and we're thrilled to be here. Just by way of background for me, I am a physicist by education. I also write science fiction novels and popular science books. No shock, I wrote a book about interstellar travel. That book was published last fall by Princeton Press, and it's intended for you, the lay audience. It's not intended for technical experts. I'm really thrilled about this book, and I hope some of you get a chance to enjoy it. Just by way of shameless self-promotion, it's the first book I've written that's being translated into 6 languages, so I'm really thrilled that there's a translation program. Now, this is kind of wordy, but basically what it says is the IRG is a nonprofit, and if you're in the United States, it's a 501c3, which basically means people can give money to it and write it off their taxes, okay? It's an educational organization. We sponsor these symposia. This is our 8th symposium. The organization sponsors scholarships for American undergraduate and graduate students who have to write essays about what the project they're going to do is contributing toward the future of interstellar flight. And the majority of those do happen to be in technical fields, but it's not limited to that. Anyone in any field can contribute to this. We have had artists, space lawyers. We have talks this week from attorneys, ethicists, philosophers, sociologists. There was a fellow who attended who wrote a wonderful textbook on space anthropology. He's an anthropologist. So we believe that to go to the stars, we have to engage the entire public. It is not something in the province of just scientists and engineers. It's got to be believed in and something that everyone's motivated to be a part of. And that's you, and that's the people you know and the networks you have. And I do want to say that this field has come a long way from its origins. When I first got involved in thinking about interstellar flight, I had been at NASA for about 10 years and was introduced to this community. And the annual gathering of this community was in this little town in Italy. And they met under the guise of being a mission, a project or a gathering of scientists talking about ultra deep space missions. And the reason for that is because they couldn't say the word interstellar, okay? Because people didn't take it seriously. You heard the challenges of distance when we were introduced. That's the one challenge. That means propulsion. It means trip time. There are all sorts of challenges. If we're ever going to send robots and people, we have to have power, communications. If you talk about sending people, you have to keep us alive or our progeny. It might be generations of ships. So the challenges are immense, and people didn't take it seriously. But there's been a rapid progress in a lot of the technologies, and I firmly believe we may be launching our first robotic probes that travel faster than Voyager in the lifetime of some people who are alive today that might get trip times to the nearest star in under 100 years for robotic probes. I think that's in the realm of possibility. And I think slightly beyond that, we might eventually send people. And the IRG wants to do its part for that. Now, it had very humble beginnings. It originally was called the Tennessee Valley Interstellar Workshop, okay? And I mentioned this in a meeting with some of my colleagues who are at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and that elicited chuckles, okay? And that really made me mad. The Tennessee Valley in the United States is Tennessee and Ohio, along the Tennessee River Valley, where it begins at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, premier nuclear research institution in the United States, instrumental in the Manhattan Project, premier work in nuclear physics today, travels through Chattanooga, Tennessee, where the Tennessee Valley Authority has all the engineers that keep the power alive in the southeastern United States, and then goes through Huntsville, Alabama, where I live, which is the home of the Marshall Space Flight Center, where we built the Saturn V rocket that went to the moon. The Atlas V rockets are built. Blue Origin has construction facilities there, and we're sending people all over the solar system and robots all over the solar system with the rockets that are built in Huntsville. It's an intellectual powerhouse. And we had a one-day meeting that was intended to be a one-day workshop, and it was a gathering of people that share this passion. At the end of the day, I was exhausted. I was the one who had organized the meeting. We all chipped in money to rent a conference room. I went back to go to bed. There was a knock on the door. Les, everybody's meeting. You're drafted. Come. They said, this was too good. We need to do this again. And so we set up this next meeting of the Tennessee Valley Interstellar Workshop. And since that time, we expanded to meeting all over the United States. Montreal is our first international meeting, and we are thrilled to be here. But we've met in several places in the US. And this year is our first year to actually be affiliated with the International Academy of Astronautics, very premier international academicians in space science and engineering. We had some of their representatives with us this morning to kick off the meeting, and I'm pleased to say we are no longer embarrassed to say we're talking about interstellar travel, okay? We don't have to use euphemisms anymore. For those that are interested in past meetings, we have an archive on the Interstellar Research Group YouTube channel of all of our past meetings with all of our speakers for 7 out of 8 years archived on there. The meetings this week will be archived on there that you can access at your leisure in a couple of months. We publish papers in peer-reviewed journals, the Journal of the British Interplanetary Society and now Acta Astronautica, the premier aerospace journal in the world published by the International Academy of Astronautics. There'll be a special section devoted to some of the papers that come from this meeting. So that'll be available for those that are interested. I've already mentioned the scholarships, and what I'm encouraging all of you to do, if you're interested in helping the vision of this organization, we love having people volunteer. We are an all-volunteer organization. We don't have any paid staff. We do this because we're passionate about it. We have people like Andrew Higgins here at the university who volunteered to work really hard this week and work as students pretty hard to get this meeting put together. And we want to thank Andrew for doing that. And as an all-volunteer organization, we rely on volunteers. And we have lots of jobs we could use help with. So please seek out anybody that you see here, and they'll point you to me or other members of the IRG organization, and we will take your name and get you involved, however you want to be involved. We'd love to have you. And to conclude, just want to say again, we are thrilled to have our first international meeting here in Montreal. I hope it is not our last international meeting. And it's absolutely a wonderful city, and I'm looking forward to being Mr. Tourist later in the week and being able to relax and see some of the beauty of your community. At this point, I'll turn it over to Alan Stern.
Well, if that didn't get you fired up, I'm afraid I can't help. My name's Alan Stern, and I'm at this meeting because I am part of a startup, a tech startup in Southern California called Helicity. And our corporate mission is to develop a fusion drive that can take us to the stars in a century or less. How's that? What kind of a company is that? And we're very proud to be one of the sponsors of this meeting, but I think I was invited tonight to talk about something else. In fact, I know that. It's because, although I grew up always wanted to be involved in space flight, I got involved in something that ended up launching 2 spacecraft to the stars. And that's a NASA mission called New Horizons. How many of you have ever heard of New Horizons? A lot of you. Great. Okay. New Horizons is, it sounds like science fiction, but it's not. We launched a spacecraft that crossed the entirety of our solar system between its launch in 2006 and 2015. It did the first exploration of Pluto and its system of moons, and is now out exploring the Kuiper Belt, the third zone of our solar system, and it's traveling so fast that it's leaving the solar system on a hyperbolic trajectory to the stars, just like the Voyagers, except it's a generation more advanced. Instead of being built with 70s technology, New Horizons was built with early 21st century technology. And I'll show you a little bit about the spacecraft. It's not very big. It's about as big as that desk that's right here in front of us. The high-gain antenna, the dish, if you will, that's about 7 feet across. The entire spacecraft only weighs about 1,000 pounds with its fuel supply included. It has, it's a little like Noah's Ark. It has completely redundant systems on board. We have a prime and a backup for thrusters, for propulsion, for computing, for guidance and nav, for communications, for thermal control, etc. So it's a very capable little spacecraft. It's now been 17 years in flight. We are 63 business cards on our way to the nearest stars. And it feels like we're crawling like molasses. We're as I said, 63 business cards, 63 astronomical units from the sun at a rate of just 300 million miles per year, or about 1 million miles per day. Really blinding speed. When we launched the spacecraft, how many of you have ever read about Apollo missions? It would launch 25,000 miles an hour, right? 3 days to get to the moon. New Horizons reached the orbit of the moon in 0.3 days and has been traveling at that same speed ever since, day in, day out, 52 weeks a year, now for 17 years. Spacecraft's in basically perfect health. And it got all of its speed, except for a Jupiter gravity assist, from this big old rocket. It's called an Atlas V. And when I was a little boy, I was really into model rockets, and I used to mow lawns and wash cars to afford bigger and bigger rockets. You have no idea how much fun it was to order this one. And I got it completely tricked out, too. We got every solid rocket motor that they make. I'll take the lightweight nose cone, you know, the whole thing. And this is a big vehicle. It's 225 feet tall. So if we put it in downtown Montreal, it would be one of the tallest things in this downtown. And yet it does what downtown buildings can't do. It can take off vertically. It went supersonic in 28 seconds, right? And in 8 minutes, it put New Horizons in Earth orbit at a speed of 18,000 miles an hour and eventually put it on its way to the moon just 40 minutes after that. And then, 9.5 years later, 2 Obama administrations, all right, we made the first exploration of this double planet, Pluto-Charon, and its system of moons back in 2015. We checked that box and we kept going. And beyond Pluto is a region of the solar system called the Kuiper Belt. It's like the asteroid belt, but on steroids. And the great thing about it scientifically is because it's so far from the sun, the temperatures out there are near absolute zero. So everything is perfectly preserved. And it's a scientific wonderland. There are little objects that didn't form into planets called planetesimals that are basically the building blocks of planets. And there are other dwarf planets like Pluto that are out there that dot the whole region. And no spacecraft had ever explored the Kuiper Belt before. We're now in the middle of the Kuiper Belt. We'll be leaving the Kuiper Belt roughly 2027, maybe 2028. We're not exactly sure because we don't exactly know where the edge is. But I have to tell you, all these projects, and I've been involved in a lot of spaceflight projects, one thing about spaceflight that's not like a lot of things we do in our life, they're never the result of one person. They're big team efforts. Spaceflight is a team sport, and when we do interstellar travel, it's going to be an even bigger team sport. I have to tell you, one of the most powerful things for me, 2,500 men and women worked to build New Horizons, its mission control center, its nuclear power supply, its launch vehicle, and the 7 scientific instruments aboard. And just 50 of us were the flight control team, the mission control folks, the engineers, and the scientists that took it across the solar system and did this exploration. And when we got there, it was like this. This is a candid shot when the very first high-resolution picture of Pluto came down on the morning of the 14th of July, Bastille Day, by the way. We stormed the gates of Pluto 2015. And I don't think the folks on my team there knew that there was a photographer behind them, but there was. And you can just see the electricity in the room. Like, we worked on this for 15 years, and it all paid off. And it was a one shot. Will it work? We got no backup, no Voyager 2. It's got to go on the first try. And then we set ourselves on a task of flying by one of these tiny little planetesimals, these objects that are about the size of the city of Montreal. This is a flyby set of images across the surface of Pluto from New Horizons. Pretty cool. You can get down and dirty as if you were flying over it in an airplane at supersonic speeds. You can see dust devil tracks. You can see hills and mountains. There's a scale bar there, 10 kilometers or 6 miles. We're going to ride up onto some giant water ice mountain blocks that are frosted in nitrogen snow. And then off across a giant glacier the size of the states of Texas and Oklahoma combined, with dune fields and all kinds of interesting physics taking place. That's the planet that we explored. But after, we set ourselves on this agenda to go after this little tiny planetesimal, which we later named Arrokoth. It's not a planet like Pluto. It's not the size of the United States. It's the size, like I said, of the island of Montreal. And it was almost twice as far from the sun as Pluto when we encountered it. At Pluto, the sunlight is 1,000 times fainter than when you go outside on a bright and sunny day. At Arrokoth, it was 4 times fainter still. So we had to chase this little thing down in the dark at 50,000 miles an hour. And again, we got one shot at it. We had a flyby that occurred exactly 3 hours into the new year on January 1st, 2019. And just to show you what this is about, I think we're not able to do this slide. This is weird. That's the slide I want to show you. Now, can we start this as a video? Yeah, here it comes. So here's Pluto again. Oh, this is the wrong video. I see. Huh. Okay, well, I'm not going to be able to show you the video I thought we had in here. But in any case, let me go on. The flyby of Arrokoth, strange little beast, looks nothing like a planet, looks like an asteroid, was also completely successful. This is at 3 in the morning when that first image came down at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab in Maryland, where our mission control is, and you can see the electricity in that room too. So this spacecraft, as I said, is headed to interstellar space. It's in perfect health. We're looking for another flyby target, but the odds are long. We only got 1/8 of a tank of gas to retarget the spacecraft. If we can find something within that fuel reach, we're going there. And the spacecraft is perfectly capable of doing that. But even if we don't go there, the spacecraft's got a lot of science left to do. We study several other Kuiper Belt objects every year as we pass them in the distance, and we study the sun's environment, the heliosphere. The nuclear power on board is expected to last into the middle of this century. The spacecraft should be operating in 2050. I like to say I'm not sure I'll be operating in 2050, but New Horizons will be. And it has the communications power and range to do that. And it should be a 21st century Voyager's mission with much more capable scientific instruments that we hope will keep operating even farther than the Voyagers have when they run out of their nuclear power. So thank you very much. I'm excited to be here this evening. We can talk more about New Horizons, or we can just talk about real interstellar travel, the kind where you go fast. Thanks a lot.
Our next speaker is AJ Link. AJ?
Hey y'all, how's it going? I'm AJ. I've got on a green lightning hat. I'm from Tampa. I've got on a black shirt. It's got a drawing of an astronaut's helmet in white, and then the Disability Pride flag in the rainbow zigzag. It's Disability Pride Month here in the US. I don't know if y'all do that here in Canada. That's important to me because I'm autistic, and I appreciate all y'all coming out to listen to us talk. I have been told I have a few minutes. I'm definitely going to be short. I like to start off by asking, whenever I do these talks or presentations, a little poll. So we're going to be kind of interactive. I hope you participate. I know for some folks it's not fun. Like for me, I don't participate when we do things like this. The question is, which would you rather do? Take a one-way trip to Mars, take a trip there and back to Luna or our moon, or stay here on Earth? So if you would take a one-way trip to Mars, raise your hand. Love y'all folks. It's the least popular option. That's where I sit. Who would take a trip to the moon and back? That's usually the most popular option. And who would stay here on Earth? I totally understand that. The reason I asked that question is I know we're talking about interstellar travel. I mostly work with interplanetary and solar system stuff. Is that there's all different kinds of folks who participate in space and want to participate in space and love space, and we all have different dreams and goals, and it's really important to understand that as we're building and talking about these projects and these worlds. And so I brought up the disability pride flag because I work with an organization called Astronautics. I think that's why I'm on this particular panel. Maybe it's the one I'm talking about on Wednesday, but that works to have disabled folks participate in space, right? And it thinks about access and how we design our spacecraft, our spaceships, how we design our facilities, who we're recruiting, who we're putting into the space. And I am a space lawyer, technically. I don't practice any law. My background is space law, and I teach space law, but I've evolved into someone who really works on space communication and accessibility. So I do that through Astro Access. I'm really fortunate to work with Erica with the Just Space Alliance. But what I've conceptualized and talked about is the right to access, and I've used international law, human rights law, thinking about different rights and how we allow people to access space, but also the spaces. And I think that's really important. And when you start thinking about that, you think about how spacesuits weren't designed for women for a while, right? You think about how when the first women were going to space, they asked them if they need like 100 tampons. Those are access needs though, right? We don't really conceptualize them that way, but those are access needs. It's how we conceptualize how we talk about space. So earlier today, and I think it was here early, there was a land acknowledgement, right? And then we had one this morning. But then we immediately started talking about colonizing space. Right? And is that language accessible to the people who have survived colonization? Not that we shouldn't go to the stars. Like I said, I would go and die on Mars. I often say like one way I would love to die is being shot into the sun, because I know like that would be so cool, right? So like I'm not saying we shouldn't go to space, but I'm saying that we should stop and pause and think about how we're conceptualizing the way we do it. There was a wonderful presentation, and they said there are space optimists, pessimists, and decelerationist. And I think that I'm possibly in the optimist/decelerationist camp, and that I think we don't really take the time to stop and think about how we're going about our long-term project of being interplanetary or interstellar. And I think we should. I think we should just take a second to think about who's been excluded. Are we designing our spacecraft so that people who maybe use wheelchairs or don't have use of their legs can use it? What about blind folks, right? What about deaf folks? Are we incorporating those into our designs? What about people whose land a lot of these nation states are taking for us to do our Earth-based observations with our telescopes, right? Are we really being as inclusive and accessible as we want to be? And I think part of this whole conference is how do we build a spacefaring culture that is the best of us? I think almost everyone here wants it to be the best of humanity that goes to the stars and not some of our worser parts. And we do have some really horrible parts of humanity, right? But are we really stopping to think about how we're designing that? Are we stopping to think about who we're inviting to our conferences? Are we stopping to think about who isn't in the room when we're talking about that, right? Something that I notice often, and I know I'm pushing my time, is there aren't a lot of people who look like me. You can look around the room. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, but there are very few people with my particular pigment, right? Are those folks allowed to go to space? Are people in the global south who have historically not had the money to be spacefaring countries allowed to go to space? If you think about the Outer Space Treaty, I won't get too technical because law can be boring. There's a right to access space. It's mostly people think about, you can't interfere with someone going to space. But what about making that an affirmative right to make sure we include everyone? The Moon Agreement's not a very popular treaty in lots of the world, especially in the US where I'm from. But thinking about how we incorporate that and we share the benefits of space with everyone equitably. And I just want folks to just stop and think about that. Sometimes people think that I'm totally against space, and I love space. I absolutely love space. That's why I do space law, which is a very niche area of law. How many people knew space law was a thing before you came here? Enough people. I was out back when someone said there was a lawyer, so wherever you are in the room, I appreciate you. You should do space law. But I just want us to, as a community, as a culture, as a people, think about how we are making space accessible and doing that for everyone. And I think I'm pushing my time, and I appreciate y'all, and hopefully we have some really good questions. So thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. I feel super fortunate. There are people who have written books, and I'm kind of just some guy who talks about space law and disability rights. So I appreciate y'all so much. Thank you.
Yeah, our next speaker is Erica Nesvold. Erica?
Thank you. I am very happy to be here, not least because I just had one of those travel stories that you end up boring all your friends and family with the next week, but I just made it. And I am going to talk about sort of a similar theme that AJ was just discussing, the ethical, social, and human rights questions that we need to think about when we think about interstellar travel. So personally, I'm an astrophysicist by trade, and nowadays I work on space ethics. And so if you'll indulge me, I'll have a brief slide about myself, because probably I heard there's a lot of engineers in the room. I always worry that people are thinking, oh, well, I'm in STEM, I don't need to think about that. I'm going to check my phone during this talk. But there's a lot of us who have crossed over, and I think it's interesting to watch how interdisciplinary these conversations can get. So my background is in computational astrophysics, which always sounds cool. I model gravity, and in particular the way that planets move around stars. And nowadays I actually work in the video game industry, making a game called Universe Sandbox, which is a very fun and beautiful way to explore how planets move around stars. But a few years ago, when I was still working as a research scientist, I started to get interested in the other side of space, the squishy human side, as I say. I had the opportunity to go out to Silicon Valley and meet a bunch of people in the commercial space industry. This is 2016, so space mining in particular was all the rage. And I was very excited to talk to these folks, but I was kind of disappointed in their answers to some questions I had about things that I thought were going to be important, but that didn't have anything to do with either rockets or investors. And the answers I got tended to be kind of dismissive. Oh, we'll worry about that later, which didn't seem right to me. But I also recognized that I didn't have the expertise to answer these kinds of questions either, because I was as STEM trained as the rest of them. My degrees are in math and physics. So when I came back, as a millennial, I processed these feelings by making a podcast called Making New Worlds, which is still available for free if you want to go listen to it online. It was 13 episodes, because podcasts are a lot of work. And I talked to actual experts in some of these questions, historians, philosophers, sociologists, a lot of the people who aren't sitting in this room, but who have a lot of expertise from our history and modern day world here on Earth that can answer a lot of these questions about our future in space. I had the opportunity to expand on the work of my podcast and turn it into a book, which I've seen some of you have copies of tonight, which is great, called Off Earth, Ethical Questions and Quandaries for Living in Space. I also had the opportunity to co-edit a more academic anthology called Reclaiming Space, Progressive and Multicultural Visions, I'm missing an S there, of space exploration, which one of my co-authors on that will be speaking on my panel tomorrow. I also co-founded a nonprofit called the Just Space Alliance. Turns out it's really easy to found a nonprofit in the US, but doing anything with it is hard. And fortunately, I have a great team of people working with me, including AJ, who is on our board of directors, and we advocate for a more ethical future in space. So, given all that, why space ethics? Why do we need to worry about this? I'll apologize, the previous slide is the only one I have that has pictures on it. It turns out when you go from astronomy to something like ethics, you lose all the pretty pictures. So if you find yourself getting bored, try counting the question marks on my slide, because that'll be pretty revealing. So a lot of people who advocate for building communities in space talk about space as if it's a blank slate where we can reinvent ourselves. But it's only a blank slate until humans get there. We'll be bringing all of our baggage with us, all of our problems with us. So we need to make sure we're planning for these social, ethical, human rights challenges, as well as figuring out how to build habitats and rocket boosters. And I'm not just talking about human factors, so things like the psychology of living in deep space or effective team dynamics. These are the sorts of things that NASA and other organizations are already studying, but also how to build healthy, thriving communities in space that represent the kind of values we want to see in our descendants, whether that's on space or on Earth. So I'm going to give you three broad examples of categories of the kinds of questions that I like to ask. One big one is, how will we treat each other when we're living in space, whether we're living on the moon or on a planet around another star or on a generation ship in between? We're going to generally send more than one human, so we need to figure out how we're going to live with each other. A big initial category of that is labor rights, because so much of the movement to get humans out into space involves making money off of space, and we're going to need workers for that. So we'll need to ask, who's going to do the work in space? Who are going to be fixing the mining machines or staffing the restaurants on a cruise ship to Mars? How will they be compensated? What happens if you work on Mars and you lose your job and you can't pay rent or for water or for air or for a ticket back to Earth? How will we protect these workers from exploitation? Because this is going to be a really isolated, really dangerous environment, and as we've seen historically on Earth, that can lead to a lot of labor exploitation. Then there's all the questions about law, which we have space lawyers for, and criminal justice. So how will we settle conflicts in space? How will we address harm and violence and make sure that everyone feels safe, and also that we protect the rights of the residents of these space settlements? These are both practical and ethical questions when it comes to criminal justice. Besides the other humans in space, we also need to think about how we'll treat our environment, the space environment. So there's a category that has had a lot of focus with this question for decades now called planetary protection, which is about making sure that we avoid contaminating the space environment with our nasty Earth microbes. And astrobiologists are particularly motivated by this because they really don't want to discover life on Mars or somewhere else and then realize that we just happened to bring it with us a few decades earlier. So astrobiologists work really hard to make sure that we're sterilizing our spacecraft and avoiding contamination. But that's going to get more complicated as more and more non-sciencey people want to go out there and do stuff in space. We also need to ask, if we do find life, what do we do then? Suppose we do find microbial life on Mars. Should we do as Carl Sagan says and leave Mars for the Martians and not doing anything else there? Should we not care and just continue on because it's just microbial life? Is it going to be something somewhere in between? This is all stuff we need to think about. The other thing is, what if we don't find life? So usually when I mention environmental protection, most people think about rainforests or pandas or coral reefs. But what about the rights of an abiotic environment, a wilderness that has zero life in it? We're talking just bare rocks here. Does that wilderness deserve some kind of protection? It's been there since before any of us got here, long before any of us got here, and a lot of the things we propose to do in space, from mining to terraforming, would irrevocably change that wilderness. So in general, we need to ask, how do we balance our desire for resources from space with whatever value that this wilderness has, and also versus the needs of future generations who also might want to use some of these resources? Which leads to the last question, how will we treat space when it comes to thinking about future generations? And this gets even more important when we're thinking about interstellar travel, which is going to take quite a while. So there are questions of environmental justice. Do we need to make sure that we're preserving some space resources for future generations to use? How do we make sure that these space resources, the benefits of space, are actually distributed amongst humankind, both in space and back on Earth, which is something a lot of people claim they want. It's easy to use big words about the benefits to humankind, but are we actually making sure that those resources are spread around? And then when we're talking much farther in the future, when it comes to, say, generation ships or permanent settlements in space, there's a bunch of reproductive rights questions. How will we create and raise children in space? Is it even possible? That's a question a lot of biologists are wondering about. But we don't even know how to study that question ethically, since it involves experimenting on pregnant people and fetuses, which most ethicists generally don't encourage. And beyond that, there's questions about what obligations we have towards these future generations, particularly the ones born in space. So if we're talking about generation ships, there's a lot of complicated ethics of, is it right for us to create life that we know is going to live out its entire life on board a ship, it's never going to get to see a planet? Is that right of us to impose upon them? What if it turns out that children raised in space in a lower gravity environment like Mars can't ever come back to Earth? Are we stealing something from them by making sure that they can never come back to the planet that their species is from? So tomorrow, we're going to focus in on one of the more urgent questions out of this set. I hope you were counting all those question marks, because I sometimes feel like my book is just full of questions with no answers. And one of the questions we'll be talking about tomorrow is who gets to go to space? This is something that we're talking about right now, long before any interstellar missions are on the books. And that's particularly important these days because our definition of what an astronaut is expanding. not just the very narrow type of person that NASA or ESA or the Canadian Space Agency selects to go into space. Now it includes that group and also very rich people who can afford to buy a ticket or friends of those people, which is also a fairly narrow definition, but we are expanding what we think of as an astronaut, and that'll continue into the future. So as we're all sitting here planning our various propulsion technologies and everything else that's going to be discussed at this symposium, we should also think about how we will decide who gets to go on this first interstellar mission. And that's what my panel will be about tomorrow, both the practical concerns of you're trying to put a crew together that will function and ensure success of the mission, but also ethical concerns. How representative do we need to be of humanity for this first big mission into interstellar space? And I hope we also end up talking about why we should be discussing these questions now, because even if none of us live to see a crew selection for an interstellar mission, having these conversations about who's included in this room, in these plans, in our dreams of the future, that'll matter for a long time to come. Thank you very much.
And last but certainly not least is Philip Lubin. Phil?
Thanks for coming to this. Quick comment. This is in the light of other suns. I came from California, been in Montreal 2 days, haven't seen the sun once. So I think I want my ticket back. Okay, so unfortunately I'm a numbers guy, and I took out as much of the numbers as I could, but I just can't take them all out, so I apologize. All right, so we'll talk about a technology which you are literally seeing right now, literally, because you're seeing that which will take us to the stars. And the thing about that technology is that it lacks one thing which you take for granted, namely you have a timer. So I put a timer in front of me. I had a timer that was put here, so don't overdo my time. But the one thing that you are looking at now has no clock. So it never ages. It goes anywhere it wants, as fast as it wants, because while it travels at the speed of light on your clock, it has no clock itself. So it goes across the universe in 0 time in its clock. And that's a remarkable thing when you think about it. That very nature is what allows us to reach the stars in times that are quite reasonable. So we're funded by a number of agencies, including NASA, Limitless Space Institute, a private foundation. I don't know if this is, use remaining I, okay. The Emmett Gladys W. Foundation, and Breakthrough Initiatives. So what I'm about to tell you is something which will actually allow you to build the engine, because without an engine, you have no mission. If you're interested or can't sleep, I'll show you something that will really put you to sleep, but go to our website to check us out, okay? Okay, so are we ready? Ready for what, okay? So how many of you like Star Trek in the room? Okay, how many have seen Avatar 2? Okay, a fair number. So I'll tell you a story about Avatar 2 in a moment, okay? So what does it mean to go interstellar for you? Well, it means it's like on Star Trek, you push the button, right, and you go to another galaxy, right? And then you come back, and guess what? All your friends are still there. Physics doesn't work that way. So take that off the table. Okay, that's a major problem. Okay, Voyager's outside our solar system, so is that an interstellar mission? Okay, and New Horizons is moving there. No, because most of us would like to be still alive when we get to where we're going, perhaps. Okay. So Star Trek has really got it right. Push the warp button, but we don't know how to push the warp button, except in a weird way in relativity. Okay. So this concept of interstellar, the reason that Les said people laugh at it is because it seems so incredible to go distances which are just enormous by our normal standards of going somewhere. So you really have to think through this carefully, not only from a propulsion point of view, i.e. an engine, but from a fundamental physics point of view. And unfortunately, I teach physics, so you're going to have to deal with that, okay? Okay, so if I offered you not just to go to Mars or the moon, but suppose I offered you a trip to Alpha Centauri one way, never coming back. How many of you would take that offer in this room? Okay, suppose I gave you a one-way ticket to Andromeda, otherwise known as M31, which is our nearest galaxy, but you're never coming back, ever. How many would take it? Yeah, me too. Okay, I want out of here, especially Montreal, which has no sun. Okay, lastly, sorry about this for those of you that are biologists. I can't use this. I'm used to teaching where I walk around and know I can't do that. Now this is useless. All right, so just like this is useless, if you look down at my slides, you'll see humans are useless, okay? You're just basically a CPU on an animal body, all right? So it's useless. I'm sorry, you're just useless, okay? Maybe you have friends who are high maintenance. Yes, you have some friends who are high maintenance. Okay, you eat a lot, you drink a lot, you can't be put into hibernate mode, right? Just kind of useless, sorry. Okay, so anyway, I'll show you a solution, but not sure you're part of it. Okay, so directed energy is a means by which you direct energy. So this laser pointer, which I can look at mine, see if it still works, is an example of directing, energy. It's kind of puny, but whatever. So directed energy is a way of propagating power over long distances, and in this case, over astronomical distances, which are of interest to propel something at enormous speeds, pushing upwards towards the speed of light. Okay, so in this case, the answer is right before your eyes, literally, because you see that very thing that you see allows you to go at these enormous speeds. There's two modes of operation in this case. One is appropriate for getting to nearby places like Mars or Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Pluto's off the map, of course, because it got demoted. And that used with ion engines that you direct the power to, so you leave your main engine at home, just put an ion engine on board, and then you can slow down by flipping the ion engine around, and it allows you to get to Mars in less than 30 days. We did a study for NASA on that one. But the main mode, when you want to go interstellar, is not to convert to electricity and drive an ion engine. It is to use the fundamental principle of what light is, namely it carries both energy, linear momentum, and angular momentum, which you can forget the latter point, but you just use momentum transfer. So when you look in a mirror and there's a light on, it's both pushing away from the mirror and pushing the mirror away from you. So think about that next time. However, the really important part of this is if you can't sleep, how many of you can't sleep? How many have trouble sleeping? Read this book, it'll put you to sleep immediately, okay? Okay. Some of you watched Avatar 2, yes? So we got a call one day from Nat Geo, which is doing a special on the science of Avatar, and they reached out to us from the Avatar team and say, can you help us get to Pandora? He said, well, yeah, okay, sure. Well, we read your papers, and we want to get there 70% the speed of light. Okay. What's the mass of your spacecraft? We don't know. Fine. Okay, how many people are you transporting? 200 plus a crew of 25. That they told me. All right, so I'll make it 1,000 tons. Okay, so we designed the system for a 1,000-ton spacecraft that goes at 0.7, 70% the speed of light, gets to Pandora in 7 years. Pandora, by the way, I learned, not knowing it, is in the Alpha Centauri region. Okay, so that's nice. All right, so it's a basically giant reflector, a humongous laser array, big flashlight, and then the spacecraft is propelled at these enormous speeds. So we made a little animation for them. What you're seeing is a reflector being illuminated by this gigantic laser array that would be best built on the moon, by the way, not on Earth, although we'll start on Earth. And we're turning it around, you can see the spacecraft. All right, so this is actually in their movie, they don't really explain this, but apparently they're going to. The main propulsion system is using directed energy to push it up to 70% speed of light. Then, of course, they got to have antimatter and fusion on board just for extra purposes. Slowing down's also an option. How many of you watched Spaceball? Spaceball's the movie. Remember in the opening scene, the spacecraft's going. Finally, you see the bumper sticker, right? What does it say? We stop for nobody, right? Which is exactly what we do. We stop for nobody. All right, so we can get you up really fast, but stopping is another problem. All right, so we have a roadmap to the stars, but along the way in this roadmap, there are lots of exit points. One of them is sending power to spacecraft in orbit. Sending power to the ISS, for example, to have ion engines on board to keep it from coming down through the Earth's atmosphere, which right now we send rockets filled with liquid propellant up to the ISS about once a year to keep it from being dragged down. So things like that, practical things like sending power from Earth to moon, point to point on the moon, to a rover, all kinds of things. Very useful. One of the applications is making spacecraft go incredibly fast. So this is a evolutionary technology and one which has no endpoint because you can just make them bigger and bigger. So one of the things we were asked to look at is could we get humans to Mars quickly? So we were set a goal of about 45 days, and we got it down to 30 days, including stopping, by the way. We thought they had to charge extra for that, but no, we threw it in for nothing. So you don't crash into Mars, you actually slow down. So this is a path forward to very rapid travel in our own solar system. Now, if you really wanted to get to Mars fast with this technology, you can get there in 2.5 days, including stopping. You would go at 1G, same acceleration you are being pulled down by Earth. You just don't feel it as an acceleration, but since acceleration equals gravity in general relativity, you'd move out at 1G, you'd slow down at 1G, 2.5 days later, you'd be at Mars. Okay, that's not something that we're concentrating on now, but this technology is the only technology that I know of that could do that. Okay, so this is a path, it's a roadmap. And the roadmap starts small and builds up big. Unlike other technologies, this technology is completely scalable from something you hold in your hand, like my laser pointer, to something gigantic, which can push Avatar to 70% the speed of light. Okay, so in our lifetime, we figure probably within 30 to 50 years, if we work hard and spend enough money, et cetera, we could perfect this technology. We're already building it in our lab. We've already started production, but we need to ramp it up, drive the costs down. So yes, we are cutting metal for the first interstellar flights, but we're not going to build it for an interstellar flight. We're building it for other purposes, such as sending power to the moon might be an interesting example. So we're cutting metal, okay? It's real. We've made it work in our lab as a demonstrator. Now we have to scale it up, okay? We show our different elements here. Each sub-element's about the size of your hand in diameter and the length of your arm, weighs about 1 kilogram. Make 1 billion of them, you can go to the stars. But too expensive right now, so starting small. Looks better in CAD, but they're real, okay? All right, so we're starting with things that do something useful, like send power from the Earth to low Earth orbit, or the Earth to geostationary spacecraft, or Earth to MEO, things like that, which would be very useful. Make it about the size of this room, and you could power the moon. Okay, so it's not that gigantic. So it's a kind of very scalable technology that's unique in that sense, from tiny to gigantic. Okay, conclusions, all right? Why is this guy talking? This is boring, right? It's like being in physics class, right? So directed energy is a path forward, right? And it also is a path forward to many, many things, one of which is relativistic flight, and another is just getting places rapidly in the solar system and powering things. Maybe you want to send power to the moon, for example. It's the only way that I know of, with the exception of an antimatter annihilation engine, to go relativistic. And by that, I mean greater than 10% the speed of light. Okay, and that would enable very fast interstellar missions. Lots of other applications. You want to take on planetary defense, you want to take out a comet, you want to take out an asteroid, this can do it for you. Okay. It also leverages a unique part of society, namely the need for speed. Well, what kind of speed? No, not the kind that comes across the border, the kind which you want data fast. Okay, that data is sent to you via what? Photonics over fiber optics primarily. So there's a huge market in electronics and photonics which is driving an exponential technology, which is why you get more for less money as time goes on, which is why you can update your phone every couple of years and it costs the same price, but it is about twice as fast every 2 years. Lots of other things. It requires a long time period, which in the age of Twitter you're not used to things that are more than 144 characters, except maybe you have double precision Twitter, which is 288 characters. Okay, but you are not used to concentrating on something for a long period of time. This is a real problem when you're looking at sort of visionary long-term human problems like this. Okay, what you want to do, from our point of view, is have a roadmap that appeals to a wide variety of stakeholders. For example, we just came off a NASA program powering a rover in a permanently shadowed region on the moon with a directed energy system that sends power into the crater, so you don't have to drag around an extension cord. You can have the rover move around, and you just follow it and feed it when it's necessary. It's an example of a technology that has many, many different things. It's not, as we call it in the United States, a one-trick pony. It can do many, many tricks. So I'll stop there, and I guess we'll take questions. Yep. Okay, thanks.
Okay, panel questions. I'm going to start this. I know we're running a little bit late, so we'll have to plow through a few of these pretty quickly. If you want to submit your own questions, we have done the egalitarian thing and made a QR code. I think I already said that joke, okay? So you can go here or to the bit.ly link there on your phone, and you can send anybody here a question. You can say everybody, or you can say a specific person. Okay. I don't know whose water that is, but sorry. Okay. I guess this is a question for everybody. We've been to the moon like 50 some odd years ago. We're going back supposedly in the next couple of years. But now we're here talking about like trying to go to the stars. And that feels like a pretty big leap. Like it feels like we're a bunch of Polynesians who have like sailed across the Pacific Ocean to the Hawaiian Islands. And then one of the sailors jokes like, okay, which moon of Jupiter do we want to travel to? Why is it worth having these conversations when like it seems so far away to go to Mars, go to interstellar space? Yep.
Is my mic working? It's green. You can hear it?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, I'll give you an answer. And it's what comes to mind at first. And it's a two-part answer. The first is that we're an aspirational species. And an aspiration of many human beings, including many in this room or you wouldn't be here, is to see our species explore very far away from our cradle, the Earth. But also, I think the other side of that coin, the other answer is because you have to start somewhere. And even if you're that Polynesian that just sailed part of the Pacific and is dreaming about flight to Jupiter, if you don't have the aspiration and if you don't start to make a plan and say, well, how would I go about that? What do I have to invent? Right? You'll never get it underway. And I really believe that the 2020s and actually 20-teens to some extent really are the inflection point where Star Trek begins. Is that we are living in an era that people will look back in the 24th and 25th century and say, that's where spaceflight took off. And by having goals that are not just what we can do in this decade or the next decade or even in this century, we can actually start to chart a path to the stars. That's my answer.
Okay.
Yeah, this is AJ speaking. I think, Alan, when you were talking, I thought of the saying, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. For me, it's important because I come from a disability justice background, disability rights background. And you think about accessibility, the example that's really tangible for folks, it's a lot easier to build something as accessible than to retrofit it. It's also a lot cheaper to do it from the beginning and design it as accessible from the beginning than having to go in and redo it. And so when we talk about the conversations, I think of the same thing. It's easier to design in spaces, complicated, disabling, we're going to get things wrong because you can't know the answers and horrible things are going to happen. But the idea that we are preparing for as many situations as possible in as many ways as possible, because we have the time, I think we can really be thoughtful about how we're creating the new future that we want. And I think that's why it's important to start the conversations early.
I'll just chime in from a personal point of view. What I didn't mention, that in my day job at NASA, I work on advanced in-space propulsion. One of those things is solar sail propulsion, which is a closely related propulsion to what Philip was talking about with the laser sails. And I've discovered, as I got involved with the interstellar community about 20 years ago, which is what motivated me, by the way, to work on solar sails, is because I wanted to build the sails that Philip's talking about to go to the stars, but we had nothing. So we had to start something to progress the technology to the point where we can talk about doing something else, which is to get us to the stars. So that really riffs off of everybody here, I think, is that if we're going to do it thoughtfully, we need to think about how we're going to implement it, and that involves not just the technical, which I tend to focus on, but the ethical, moral, social kinds of steps that we need to address early on so that when the question really is in our face, we've had time to think about it, right? And so I really think that in all these areas, it's as the Canadian astronaut Julie Payette said this morning, people asked Leonardo da Vinci the same question when he was drawing airplanes, 400 years before they fly, right? Why are you doing this? Well, someday we're going to fly. And we need to start thinking about it. And that inspires people. And that gets the ball rolling. And we make those incremental steps.
Okay. This is a question for Erica. Your book, Off Earth, talks about a lot of the ethical challenges with humans living in space and other worlds. I got to look at it yesterday, and I got to look at the names of some of the chapter titles. And they're like some of the funniest chapter titles. So
They're all
here's
questions, so.
Yeah, and these, I could probably just do the interview just asking the questions. Here's some of the ones. Where's my money? Which, as a freelancer, how many times I've said that to a client, okay? What if someone steals my stuff? Again, I've had experience, okay? Which way is Mecca? Okay. And who's in charge, okay? The first chapter of the book is, should we settle space? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I cribbed the chapter titles from my podcast episodes. Highly recommend making a podcast before a book. It saves you half the time. But in my podcast, the Should We Be Doing This at All episode was the last one I did. And it was initially the last chapter of the book. And then I realized maybe we should be asking this question first. So I moved it to the front because there are plenty of people out there who make very persuasive arguments that either we shouldn't try to create permanent human settlements in space ever, or that at the very least we shouldn't do it right now, the decelerationist, that we're not mature enough as a species, that we're not ready, and that if we try to do it now, we'll do it badly, so badly that it's not worth rushing into it. Personally, I don't feel strongly in that direction. I think most of us on this panel probably don't feel that we shouldn't do it at all or that we should wait. However, I do think it's really important to have conversations with those people and to explore these ideas, because it's always worth having conversations with people on the other side of your argument, but also they tend to make really good points about what they're worried about, what specific concerns they have if we try to rush into settling space or sending an interstellar mission or strip mining the moon. Listening to what the fears are and what the concerns are is worth doing, because you can't just skip over the part where you say, well, should we be doing this, and just jump into doing it. You need to stop and say, should we be doing this? Okay, even if the answer is yes, how should we be doing it to assuage the concerns of those people?
In the podcast episode, I think this was like episode 2, it was somebody asked, probably you asked, why are we going? And like, what's the reasons that like people explore? Not just for the fun of it, but like, why do people explore into space? Or historically before, like history of, yeah.
This is a really interesting question. I mean, part of what got me into looking at the ethics side is looking at the reasons people give when they're out there being space settlement advocates, whether they're trying to get investors or they're just trying to convince people to join their interplanetary or interstellar societies. What's the narrative here? And there's several different ones, and I think it's worth all of us asking ourselves, why are we involved in this? Why do we think humanity should be involved in this? Because the different possible reasons for why we think we should be doing this will affect the decisions that we make. So if I as a person am in the business because I want to be the first trillionaire, so I'm going to go mine the asteroids, I'm going to make different decisions with my space company or space organization than if I'm someone who thinks that the long-term survival of the human race depends on it. And so really asking ourselves, why do we want to do this? And why do we think humanity should do this? Which are two different questions. Some of us just want to do it because it's cool, but we think humanity has a more legitimate reason. We should be asking those questions and thinking about how they'll affect the answers to all the other questions I ask.
I made a joke about lawyers when I first got up here, and I deeply regret it. The common person might sort of think like space is sort of lawless, like it's like the wild, wild west, but it's really not. In particular, there's a treaty called the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. What is that?
AJ.
Am I supposed to answer that? This is AJ.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
so I think even within the field of law, like lots of folks raise their hands, and that's super exciting for me. People don't know about space law. So in the US, there's a very famous memo where someone said, we want Guantanamo Bay to be like space where there's no laws, which is just false, right? There's tons of space law. There's national space law, there's international space law. So the Outer Space Treaty is an agreement between the US and the former USSR, because it was in the 60s, with Great Britain / England being the intermediary, where they're like, well, the US wants to do space this way, the USSR wants to do space this way. Can we come to a compromise where we don't completely militarize space and blow each other up? So that's why you're not allowed to have nuclear weapons in space or weapons of mass destruction, but you can have every other kind of weapon. So I think educating folks on why space isn't lawless and not making the Wild West comparisons. So we talked a little bit, or I talked a little bit earlier about colonization, but like there's this ethos of frontierism and how that's good and we should try to recreate that. And that's not entirely true. Like that kind of thought process and mentality is really harmful and really detrimental and really, really hurt a lot of people. And I think communicating that space has laws, whether or not they're enforceable is like a completely different question, right? And the utility of international law is another question. As someone from the US where, international law doesn't mean a lot to the US government sometimes. I think being able to teach folks that it's a field that they can help craft, I think that's one of the things that drew me to space law is like, it's still evolving. It's still one of the few areas of law right now where you can help craft the direction of it. I think like, I haven't been doing this a long time and I get to be on a panel like this simply because I had new ideas about what the law could and should be and they resonated. So I think it's really important for people to think about, doing space law stuff because it's cool and you get to do stuff like this instead of like whatever.
So, I heard some claps. You can clap.
Thank you.
Sort of bouncing off, this is for everybody, everybody can answer. The Artemis Accords. So we have the Outer Space Treaty 1967, the Artemis Accords. What are the Artemis Accords? And like, what's good about it? What's bad about it?
I think we should note that there are other space law treaties too. So there's 5 total treaties. There's the Outer Space Treaty, there's the Liability Convention, the Rescue and Return Agreement, which means, if an astronaut falls somewhere, please be nice to them. And then the Registration Convention, so people know where folks' stuff is. And the Moon Agreement. The Moon Agreement's only been signed by 19 countries, but one just took off to sign the Artemis Accords. So I would say, from my perspective, the Artemis Accords are, one, they're not legally binding. They're not hard law, as we say. They are an attempt to create norms as we move into space. So the US and some partners deciding that it's important to create a culture where people act responsibly. And they do that out of goodwill or faith instead of
maybe to back
being
up, can
bound
you
by
describe
law.
what the Artemis, maybe Les, do you want to describe what the Artemis Accords are?
I'm participating on this panel as a private citizen, not representing NASA tonight, so I really better pass on that question.
Okay. Anybody else want to?
So I'll continue.
Okay, yeah.
The Artemis Accords are bilateral agreements between different space agencies. It's kind of unclear because the space agencies are signing on behalf of their countries, but they're saying they're not the countries. And it's just this list of, I would say, norms, expectations, and priorities that the countries that sign on to the Artemis Accords are agreeing to and how they shape space moving forward.
And some of it, right, is about getting more specific about the Outer Space Treaty and how we're actually going to work within the Outer Space Treaty. So, for example, the Outer Space Treaty says that we shouldn't have harmful interference with each other's activities in space, but that's kind of all it says. It's a very readable treaty. I recommend it. And so the Artemis Accord says, okay, well, how do I make sure that my mining site or launch pad isn't going to interfere with your radio telescope that you're building next to me on the moon? Should we create safety zones? How are we going to work that out? And it's starting to head in that kind of direction. It was, I'll point out, developed by the U.S. and not in the way that the Outer Space Treaty was developed by multiple countries together, correct?
I will say that proponents of the Artemis Accords would say that the U.S. developed them in concert with partners. And I think your point about safety zones is really correct. We should go to a different question because we're getting technical. But part of the Outer Space Treaty is that you can't appropriate space by use or anything else. And proponents of the Artemis Accord say safety zones aren't appropriation. We're just saying that we are here and you shouldn't come unless you tell us, which sounds like appropriation to me, but I'll stop talking about that.
This could go in a lot of different areas. Should these large-scale projects, should they be government-run, private-run? So let's take an example of like a moon base or like a base settlement on Mars. Efficiency-wise, better to go government-run. Rights-wise, better to go government-run. What's the take?
I think it's a false choice. They don't have to be one or the other. I think in different instantiations we'll see on different places around the solar system, private and government-led expeditions and bases or whatever you want to call them. And they're not mutually exclusive. Mars could have both. Any place could have both. Free space as well. And there are going to be places where private industry leads, and there are going to be places where governments lead.
I know I'm short on time, so I'm going to start going for your guys' questions. I hope that's okay. This one here, this is for everybody. What are the economic incentives to go interstellar?
So this is I believe, seriously misunderstood problem, because if you want to go interstellar, you truly want to send humans to interstellar destinations, and you want to get them back again. That technology is very, very different on timescales which are reasonable, i.e. within the human lifetime. So most of the times when you're talking about interstellar missions, except for the stuff I described, which could be quite rapid, but are more or less flyby missions. So one of the things in Avatar that they don't really tell you about is, it's not. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. One of the things they don't really tell you about in Avatar, if you watch the kind of opening scenes when they're landing, it's unclear what they're using, but they're technically using antimatter to land on the planet. So the cost of these missions, I took out a lot of the mathematics here, but if you really wanted an Avatar class mission, the design we set up requires 10 petawatts, which is 1,000 times the total U.S. peak electrical production, assuming 100% efficiency. It takes about a year to accelerate, uses 63 gigawatt hours, and costs at 10 cents per kilowatt hour, 6.3 petadollars per launch. So the reason I mention that is that when people talk about the economics...
Hold on. There's million.
Yeah, there's
trillion.
Yeah, there's
quadrillion.
There's kilo, which is 1,000. Then there's mega, which is 1,000,000. Then there's giga, which is 1 billion. Then there's tera, which is 1 trillion. And then there's peta, like you can pet your cat or whatever, which is 1,000 trillion. So you're talking about launch costs for a human class mission, which vastly exceed, in fact, it was about 240 years of California's budget just for the electrical bill, assuming 100% efficiency. So one of the problems, I mean, if you're seriously interested in looking at interstellar, it's very different than going to Mars. It's just totally different, right? It is not the same talking space. Going to Mars, okay, you go there, maybe it takes you maybe a month with our technology, or a couple of months with other people's technologies, or a year. You come back, it's still basically the same place. You go to the nearest exoplanet, which is Proxima Centauri, which is a little over 4 light years away, and let's say you go at half the speed of light, which is a really fast pace. It takes you 8 years to get there, and let's say you turn around and come back, it takes you another 8 years. 16 years later when you land. These things have to be talked about in the context in which interstellar is real and not just a word or something that you see on TV. So my emphasis, when people ask me, should we send people on interstellar missions, it's like, yeah, sure, if you can push the warp button, but you just start by sending interstellar probes that send back pictures, data, etc. But things like Avatar, Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever, we do not possess that kind of technology in a reasonable way. And the numbers I gave you for Avatar they're correct numbers. It would cost vastly more than the whole world's GDP just to afford the electric bill.
But I'm sorry, I can't let that go. I think we talked earlier about the first trip across the Pacific, settling the islands. And so we're kind of asking the question, how many seashells will it take, to go to the moon? I don't think we would want to attempt interstellar travel with humans using anything close to the technology we have today. And if the history of technology is a guide, then and the fact that we don't know that we know everything about how the universe works right now. 200 years from now, we're going to have a better understanding of dark matter, dark energy. The unanswered questions of physics will hopefully be at least fewer, right? And the whole economics of the world will be radically different than it is today. And it could still be petadollars, right? In whatever the dollar or euro or whatever is worth in that day. But it could also be looking at, not that bad, right? And the second thing I want to comment on is we do a lot of things not because of an economic return, and I hope we continue to do things not because of economic return. No one would build a James Webb Space Telescope for how much money it returns. We're doing that for the scientific knowledge gain and increase. And I think personally, and this is a comment on our whole funding of science that has changed over the last 50 years, I hate the return on investment question. Sometimes questions are worth answering just because they're unanswered and we need to investigate and figure out what's going on. And that's just my opinion.
This is for everybody. This talks to human nature. What makes one think interstellar society would be better than ours now? Won't it just sink to the level of Twitter? Sorry, Threads? No, Threads is the cool spot right now.
The question is will we be better in an interstellar society as opposed to
I guess you could think of
society?
we're thinking sort of more about what we're doing more intentionally if we're going these large distances, but go ahead.
So I think about this a lot, and in fact, my book has a great quote from someone else whose name I keep forgetting. It's in the book, I feel bad, where he said, there seems to be this idea that going to space will just make us nicer. And this idea is very common amongst people who are really advocating for us to go live in space. And I don't think that's true, especially without stopping to be deliberate and think about what we're doing. We're just not gonna be better people in space than we are on Earth. I think there are some interesting things about the way we'll have to live in space that will shape our culture there. For example, the fact that we'll have to be more communal just because we'll be living in shared habitats with centralized life support. That'll change the way that we live and work with each other. You're not going to have the ability to just go strike out on your own and live off the land, because that's going to kill you even faster than it would here in Canada. And so I think that is going to shape how our societies work, but I don't think it'll change human nature. So we have to keep thinking about these issues.
Yeah, this is AJ. Something that I've learned within the space community is this idea that space is big enough for all of us. And I think there are going to be lots of different iterations of how our descendants live and socialize and create their cultures, and they won't all be the same. So maybe there will be some really communal places on celestial bodies, and maybe there will be really cutthroat places. And eventually people will be able, you would hope, you talked about economics, like I don't even know what the financial system would be, but you would hope that people would self-select in the communities that they eventually can go to. And, that's not always possible. You look at here on Earth, we're not always born where we want to be. We can't always afford to go where we want to go. But eventually it will be a diversity of our descendants, and those values will be vastly different wherever they are.
Les, you look like you were contemplating an answer. No? Okay, all right, okay. We're going to go about 10 minutes over. Is that okay? Okay, all right, cool. Maybe 12 or 15 minutes. Okay. This question for Alan. So New Horizons launched in 2006 and it arrived in 2015, 9 years later. When did it first start? Not the launch, not like the pitch. When was like the first time you started working on this mission?
Yeah, so I think the question really is, when did people start to think, why haven't we done Pluto? And it's a very easy time to put a marker on. It's when Voyager made its last flyby, which was at Neptune. And it was over. And because the mechanics of the trajectory didn't allow it to go in the direction of Pluto, young scientists of the day started to think about that mission, as in completing the reconnaissance of the solar system. Now, what we didn't know was just around the corner was the discovery of the Kuiper Belt and the fact that dwarf planets, Pluto wasn't alone, that there are a whole population of these dwarf planets, which is actually ultimately why the National Academy of Sciences, 14 years later, placed it at a high priority in a decadal survey and got it funded. But there was that whole period from the late 80s until the early 2000s where the scientific community was trying to marshal a case for doing this. And then NASA had a competition in the early 2000s. Our team, the New Horizons team, won it. Right after that, the decadal survey came out, and then Congress funded it. And then we got it built and launched in 2006.
Okay. And the year that you first started pitching to do this, you pitched and it got rejected once, and then you pitched and it got rejected twice, and then you pitched and you got rejected
10,000 times.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 1988, which is 1 year before Milli Vanilli.
So you kept pitching. Why stay with it? Like, wouldn't after the second or third time of trying to do it, why wouldn't you say give up at that point?
Well, part of it was persistence, and part of it was a feeling that that was a really good pitch. We have a really good story. But honestly, I think mostly it was the following. For planetary scientists, the most prized missions to be on are the first of its kind. The first mission to Mars, the first mission to Venus or Mercury or Jupiter, etc. And in the generation before mine, in the Carl Sagan generation, the generation of people my parents' age, those scientists got to do all these great first missions to the moon, to Mars, to Venus, to Mercury, to Jupiter, all the way out to Neptune. And then when Voyager went by Neptune in 1989, and it just ended, our generation of scientists said, there's one more train to Clarksville. There's a chance to get on a first mission to a whole new kind of place, Pluto. And we didn't want to give up on that because it was so scientifically enticing. A chance to just go open that present and see what's inside.
Some interstellar flight, that's going to take a while to put together. And I don't want to suppose, but some of us might be a bit too old to see it come to fruition. Why stick with something that you might not see the result of?
So from my point of view, there's a saying that it's in the front of my book, which is that you're not required to finish a project, but nor are you allowed to ignore its need. So I think many of us in the scientific community feel this is something that we can do, and by doing so, we'll enhance the abilities of humans to do many other things along the way. So just as we haven't sent any humans out to Jupiter, but still we love to send probes out to Jupiter to look at Jupiter and its moons and Pluto and et cetera. So we have to be, I think, somewhat realistic as we go, and perhaps we will discover new physics, which is, would be great. I don't think we're at the end of exploring the universe at all. So I agree with Les's comment that there's much to be learned. But we can embark on a path which will allow us to send at least robotic probes to interstellar distances. And that we can do, therefore there's no reason not to do it, and it allows us to return a lot of information that we don't currently have. And perhaps we will find signatures of life as an example. So from my point of view, it's not just because we can do it, therefore we should do it. It's that the return on human knowledge from doing so is enormous, and it enables many things that we cannot currently do. Therefore, it's a positive for humanity. It's different than the discussion about, say, law on Alpha Centauri. Like, I have no idea how to answer that question because I don't know how to send humans to, set up shop on Alpha Centauri. But I do agree within our solar system that these discussions are very valid. What I don't know is how do we extend humanity with current ideas of physics, just basic physics, to allow humans to set up shop on Proxima Centauri, which is our nearest exoplanet. I don't know as a physicist how to do that in a reasonable way. I do the math, I can tell you the numbers. I could design a system which, in theory, just as I did for Avatar, this will get you to Pandora in 7 years, which is what they wanted. 7 years. Okay, but the reality of doing that just has to be kept in perspective. So we have to keep both it real and dream at the same time.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
Because I hate to say it, but I think it's another false choice. There are many things that we start that we want to start with the intention of finishing. An example might be a meal or to watch a series on Netflix. You start it expecting to see how it turns out.
Or Avatar 2, trying to start watching it and then getting it.
There you go. But there are also lots of things we normally do that we never expect to see the ending of. When we have children, we don't expect to see how that story will end because we expect they will outlive the parents. And when we start making a greener Earth, we know that it might take many generations, but we have to start if we want to see society get there. And I think we can just separate things into different categories of things that we expect to see how they finish, and many things that we all do that we're a part of and aspiring to, where we never expect to see it finish in our lifetime, but we want to be part of that change. And I think interstellar travel falls in the latter category.
Oh, yeah, this is AJ. When I do, I guess, my job or speaking or whatever, I talk about rooting your work. What are your values? And my values are accessibility, grace, and legacy. And not legacy like a big deal, but a small deal. And so I don't know how many folks in this room know who Judy Heumann is, but she recently passed away. She's a really important person in the disability rights movement. And I knew Judy, right? And
Personally knew Judy.
yeah.
In Berkeley.
Yeah, it was amazing. I got to go to her memorial. Well, anyway, I am part of Judy's legacy, and I'm a nobody compared to Judy. She literally changed the world. Not many people can do that. But what I can do is provide my perspectives, my insights, the values that I'm using Judy as this is that Judy taught me as a person to build a more accessible world. And the world isn't going to be fully accessible for disabled folks in my lifetime, and I know that. But my work and my job and my responsibility is to pass those values along so that message can continue on long after I'm gone. So like something that we don't have here is a sign language interpreter or captions, right? That's an inaccessible feature of this. But if I bring that up, maybe the next person who does a conference will think we need to budget for sign language interpretation and captioning, right? And so I just have to keep repeating that and keep repeating that and keep repeating that. And long after I'm gone, maybe the world will just be a little bit more accessible for me. So I think when it comes to, why do we do this? Why do we talk about this? Because I want the things that I care about and my values to be in the conversation, to be in the room, because they often aren't. And I know that because I'm in those rooms and I don't hear anyone saying the things that I say. And I want those values to continue on long after I'm gone.
Yeah. This is maybe a weird way to follow that, but the way I like to think of it, or the way I do think of it when I think about these questions, is that time is going to pass anyway, right? We're all going to die. I mean, there's children in the room, sorry about that. But it's true. In a generation or two, none of us will be here. That there's nothing we can do about that. So what do we want to do with that time that's going to pass inevitably? We could do it doing interesting stuff, working for justice, working for our scientific future and our better understanding of the universe, or we could not do that and leave the next generation sitting in exactly the same place we are now going, oh, now I'm going to have to start this project that I won't see the end of.
Cool. We're over time, and my next question is going to be about oxidizers, but I think we'll leave it at that. So in the lobby, a few books are going to be on for sale, and we have some of the authors here who have pens to perhaps sign said books. So we have Alan's book here, Chasing New Horizons, Erica's book, Off Earth, and we have a few copies of Les's book, Traveler's Guide to the Stars. Cool.
In the business, we call that limited edition.
Yeah, limited edition. Yeah, absolutely. I guess a huge thank you to the conference organizers. Who has never organized a conference before? That's a lot of hands, okay? I think it should be like mandatory. You should work in fast food for a year, and you should also organize a conference. So the students here, you should stand up and get another round of applause because it's. I saw them last night, and I asked, you guys stressed out? They're like, no, we're good. This morning, you guys stressed out? No, we're good. So thank you for coming out. I hope we had to cut the questions a little bit short, but I think we learned a lot. So thanks a lot, and they'll be upstairs hawking out books and signing graphs, and thank you for coming.